Hello and welcome to Now&Xen, the podcast about microtonal and Xenharmonic music. Today's guest is Isaac Schankler. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay, great. It's so nice to have you on the podcast.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I first figured out that you were using microtones from your Alien Warp Etude, which is featured on that excellent piano album with the Aaron Kallay duo. I forget what it's called, but it's very iconic.
Well, there's the one by Aaron Kallay, that's called Beyond 12, I think.
Yeah.
Is that the one you're thinking of?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Aaron is a friend and longtime collaborator of mine. We started a concert series together back in the day called People Inside Electronics that is still around and doing stuff. But he has also been very involved in Microfest, which is the local concert series that has like all microtonal music, and they've had I forget how long it's been around, but they've had so many different amazing concerts and tons of different composers and performers involved. They have a record label as well called Microfest Records.
Yes.
So, that was Aaron's project. I think first solo project with that record label, and commissioned. I forget exactly how many, but it's been an ongoing project, and he's commissioned a bunch of composers to write microtonal piano music, and I was really honored that he asked me to be part of that project. I think there's going to be a Volume 2 album at some point too as well.
Ooh, do you know if it's in the works, or have you talked to Aaron about that?
I have talked to him about it, but I don't know when it's coming out.
Neat.
I think that most of it is recorded, but I couldn't tell you who the composers are or when it's coming out. But it'll be on Microfest Records.
Neat. All right, well, we'll keep our eyes peeled for it then, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so then Alien Warp Etude then is your sort of contribution to the album. What kinds of scales did you use in that? What was going on compositionally?
Yeah, I was trying to remember that before this conversation. I was like, what did I do? And so so I think I had struggled a little bit, or I'd gone through a few different iterations of what I wanted to do with it. And the thing that I kept coming back to was just thinking about modulation and changing keys, and that being such a big part of just like classical music and Western music and different kinds of music. And I had played around with various kinds of just intonation before, but when I had done that, which I really love the sound world of, but in thinking about that, I was really flummoxed about trying to move to different keys in that context, because it's so grounded in, like, it's all based on like one particular pitch.
Yeah.
So it becomes like really hard to move around unless you want things sounding really strange, which sometimes you do. You could have two kind of superimposed harmonic series that were a neutral third apart.
Ooh.
And the neutral third is another interval that I really love, because it's in between the major third and the minor third, and it has this sort of interesting ambiguous quality to it. And so I figured out, I think it was like an undecimal third or something like that. I would have to go back and look to make sure, but
Yeah. Was it like maybe 11/9?
I think so. That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, 11/9.
Yeah. I'm glad you're the right person to be having this conversation, obviously. So what happens? So I figured out you could do that, and actually some of the tones between the two harmonic series would actually overlap with one another.
Right. Exactly, or just very, very close, or both?
I think there was one tone. That was exactly fits into both harmonic series. And so you could have, and I arranged it so that the white keys were in one harmonic series and the black keys were in another harmonic series.
Oh, cool.
You could sort of modulate in a way that was related to that felt like like in a classical piece where you're moving from like the minor to the relative major or vice versa, and it had that sort of feeling to it. But then you also got these interesting kind of tones of inflection when you start to blend the two harmonic series together. So it's a funny piece because it's very like I don't know, people either seem to really like it or really hate it. I think because it's so referential to like the classical tradition in some ways, and some people want their microtonal music to be really not that.
Right.
But for me, I just decided, you know what, I'm interested in this kind of funky in-between world, and I'm just going to embrace it.
Yeah, great strategy. Your approach reminds me of Kyle Gann's Hyperchromatica. When we had him on the podcast, we talked about how each of the three pianos that he used for that piece were parts of different chains of harmonic series, essentially, that sort of related to each other. Do you know how far apart your harmonic series were? Like, if you had a harmonic series on 1/1, do you know what note your other harmonic series started on? It started on, or did it start on 11/9, the neutral third you mentioned?
I think it's 11/9. I think it starts on that neutral third. So on the keyboard, I think it was G. It was mapped to G, and then B flat would be the undecimal third on the keyboard. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. I like how you are using the black keys for one harmonic series and the white keys for the other. Does that mean that you only used one piano for Alien Warp Etude, or did you use two? Because the Ṛêvzur Kallay duo uses two pianos, right? Generally.
Yeah. So actually, that piece is just one piano. That piece is just for Aaron Kallay. Yeah, it's funny. I know that the Ṛêvzur Kallay duo also specializes in microtonal music, but when I wrote for them, I didn't write them. I missed the opportunity to write them a microtonal piece. I wrote them something that wasn't microtonal at all. But I know that they played so many different cool microtonal things, like the piece by Pope, the piece that keeps changing. Where it keeps changing tunings throughout. I think it's called Rad or Rod. I don't know.
Oh, I've heard of that. I gotta look that up.
Yeah, that's a really fun piece too, and that piece is really wild to watch perform too, because the other thing that Aaron and Vicky do is that a lot of microtonal composers who work with keyboard instruments do, which is to use digital pianos, which gives you a lot more freedom with the mappings, and you can have every octave can have a different tuning, or within an octave that you play on the piano, you can have wild leaps between ranges and things like that.
Yeah.
And so that piece is pretty wild because it's constantly changing tunings, and then by the end of the piece, I don't know if this is the case for everybody watching this piece, but for me as a pianist or as someone who plays piano, it's really disorienting to watch, because by the end of the piece, they're playing so fast, but the sounds you're hearing are so amazing and bizarre and it's almost like your brain can't even process the connection between what they're doing with their fingers and the sound you're hearing.
Oh, I love it.
It's completely disconnected, because the ranges are all over the place, and it's quite a thing to behold. Really enjoyable piece.
Yeah. Do you know how they were changing tunings during that piece? That's a very interesting concept, I think, for a lot of composers to potentially be exploring, is changing tunings mid-piece.
Yeah, actually, not something you can do super easily on acoustic instruments. The I think of examples like from Grisey, who makes the retuning. I think it's the viola, the retuning of the viola, like a kind of theatrical part of the piece, and Hans Abrahamson does something similar in Schnee, where he kind of like sneakily has the string players retune in these interlude movements.
Yes.
But it's really, you can't do that a bunch of times. You can't ask a player to keep doing that, every couple of minutes or something. Or maybe you could. I don't know. Maybe someone could.
Yeah, it really would depend on what you're using and all of that. The tools start to matter like a lot when you're dealing with microtonality because of how different each situation is, really, with each individual instrument and player.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and players' comfort level with it as well. I know, and there are some composers who ask for such specific things, and who are even the players are playing with tuners in front of them, which I think is a really interesting approach. It's kind of like, it almost seems like a different kind of mode of performance where, I don't know, where instead of your performance being connected to a sort of internal thing, it's connected to an external thing. It's not connected to your internal ear, it's connected to sort of an external, it's like you're outsourcing your ear or something. It's strange.
Yeah, we talked about that on the Johnny Reinhardt episode a little bit, actually. He talked about how his fretless guitar concerto was achieved with external tuners, so that I think the guitar player is Michael Hoftka? I hope I'm remembering that right. Maybe not. I think he had an electronic tuner attached to his guitar, and so that helped that piece work. I wonder with the piece you mentioned, that's always changing tuning, if the piano notes are always still making sense linearly, or maybe you can't even tell, because I'd be really interested in situations where, like, the piano notes or buttons that you're pressing might not even spell low to high in a correct order. I think it would be kind of cool to, like, use video elements to disillusion whoever was watching by, like, playing something on the piano but then making the notes completely not match the visual information in a very obvious way.
Right. Yeah, and I think that piece that I mentioned by Pope does that. I think there are definitely some nonlinear stuff, which, lets you play, really low bass notes and high melodic notes in the same octave. I think there's a few Gann pieces like that too. I think the Fugitive Objects and a couple other pieces like that where the piano is remapped in that way. And it's cool. It's like a way to sort of, to me, it's also sort of a way to access kind of like the sort of intuitive, because like playing music at the piano and composing music at the piano too, to an extent, is very intuitive. It just feels very intuitive. Yeah. In a way that, like, composing a computer, for example, doesn't always. It feels very, because it's all about the feel of the keys under your hands. And so if you sort of do these remapping, at least with the Gann pieces, I get the sense that, like, it allows him to explore these things in a more intuitive way, because it's just kind of like laid out in front of you on the keyboard, and you can kind of explore these things that were adjacent now, that weren't adjacent before, but now, like, these intervals that are really difficult to play are now really easy to play, and you can hear what they sound like. So I know for me that sometimes in working with microtonal elements, you can get very abstract, right? You can get very abstract very quickly into talking about the mathematics and the ratio, and very, if you're not careful, really disconnected from sound. So anything that kind of like brings it, for me, into that realm of the intuitive is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why, with like Harry Partch's microtonal instruments, you have arrangements where things are, the traditional structure of low to high is challenged so that the intuition matches kind of what the composer is thinking. And I think that's kind of a cool approach too, is seeing the composer's craftsmanship in whatever is happening based on the instrument layout, where the keys are being pressed, and things like that. I know that I have a guitar piece that does that, where it's in 9-tone equal temperament, and I retuned open strings so that they would be adjacent chromatic pitches in 2 groups. And the guitar players hate playing it because reading the music and the tablature just match so little. But I'm like a guitar player, but I'm not like intuitive enough at the guitar to know that would be jarring. So it took like 2 performances of it before I was like, oh, the first people weren't just complaining to complain. This is like actually weird.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing that I've encountered too is kind of almost like, well, it's like almost like on the opposite end of microtonality, but it feels related to me. Are pieces that use autotune, like there are these pieces by Hearne that use this kind of autotune functionality, but he's not using it in a traditional way. He's using it to sort of create this kind of tension between someone's unfiltered voice and the voice as it comes through this autotune effect. I've worked with singers who played that piece and sort of run the electronics for some of those pieces, and some of them they find it really disorienting to perform those pieces, because what the singers are doing is so again, so intuitive and so connected to their body. Their body is their instrument, and they're used to having their body feel a certain way and producing a certain sound with it, and to have that be completely overridden by this artificial process. I've heard people singers describe it as just like really disorienting, and something that they really have to practice with, which you think, well, it's auto-tune, it does it automatically, what do you need to do? But it's actually, to get used to it is actually not trivial. I think because he's actually, he's mapping them to, I forget exactly what it is, but he's mapping them to different kinds of scales, so that you might sing a tone and it might sound as a different tone, so that you're kind of harmonizing with these auto-tune versions of yourself. Very cool stuff.
I find autotune to be a really, really interesting tool, so I'm trying to get into that more. I heard a really cool podcast episode with Alex Downing on lexical tones.
Okay.
And he was using autotune actually for microtonal purposes, and I was just listening to lexical tones like I usually do, and then he talked about the microtonality, and I didn't even know that was going to happen, so it was kind of shocking and exciting. Apparently he had to do some really, really difficult, hard coding work to make the autotune do microtones.
Wow.
It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if there's some... Yeah, because I don't know, if the auto-tune stuff does that out of the box. I also know that there's a piece of software called Imitone, IMITONE, being developed by, his name is Evan Balster.
Yeah.
And I know that one of the things, I don't know if it's implemented yet, but I know that one of the things he wants to do with that software eventually, I don't know if he's incorporated yet, but to incorporate it with, the Scala method or the Scala...
You mean
Scala method or description of microtonality, so that you can just sort of boom, load in a Scala file, and then boom, you're auto-tuning to a different tuning.
Yeah, that'd be pretty awesome. I always wonder how many notes those kinds of things can handle.
Yeah.
That's with 1,200 notes per octave, that's way too many, of course. At least too many for most people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you use? What did you use for Alien Warp Etude? Did you use Piano Tech for that?
Yeah. So I used Piano Tech, and basically, along with the composition, sent Aaron a preset for Piano Tech, because that's what he uses. That's what he ended to use for all of those pieces. They use Piano Tech. Because it's so easy to retune, and it sounds really good.
It's definitely definitely got a recognizable sound, though. Like, usually when I hear something with microtonal piano, I'm like, oh, that's piano tech.
It does. Way more realistic than the vast majority of piano samples, but it does have a kind of distinctive signature sound, especially in the microtonal area. Fortunately, it's a sound that I like.
Yeah, me too. I'd agree. You know, Herman Miller, he has some of these songs that are microtonal that he has his, like, he like built a language for his own little world. He's a pretty creative guy.
Oh, cool.
And he has his microtonal voices sing that. I don't know what program he uses. He strikes me as a guy who would, like, build it himself out of pure code and probably, like, only he can use it. But I know there are, like, there are some ways to, like, auto-tune the voice to microtones that are kind of hard. I don't know if Melodyne works as a plugin, but I know the basic version's easy. I don't know if you've used that.
Yeah, I bet you could use Melodyne for it. I bet it would be very tedious because you'd have to do everything kind of manually.
Yes, it's incredibly tedious. You're right.
Yeah, but you can do it for short things. Do it with kind of like vocaloid software too. I mean, that would be really interesting. I also wanted to ask what you did for your hand washing song, because that was all vocals.
Wash your hands, it won't take very long. Wash your hands until the end of this song. 20 seconds is longer than you think. Oh, wash up extra soap, let your hands won't stink. Or have a virus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so, by the way, this leads us into our excellent, hand-washing album that Isaac put together for the coronavirus epidemic, putting some compositions together for various composers. So for my song of the album, I had Dorico play some tracks, and I wrote like this big tag in 31, and I made it really complicated, and I slowed it down so that I could sing it, and then when I sped it up, I think I found out that my vibrato on some notes was naturally so fast that it was not suitable for 31 tone equal temperament at that speed, but I kind of like the sound quality anyway. There's like this first chord at the beginning that's like immediately supposed to be minor that happens, and it just doesn't sound minor at all, and I didn't even care. It technically modulates to, well, if it starts in... what does it start in? I feel like it starts in E, and then it goes to C half sharp major, and then it goes to F. It's either F half flat major or F sesqui flat major. I don't remember. But the hope is that, like, at the ending part, where I'm singing about washing your hands extra, that with the stink syllable, you can still, like, hear the descent by a degree of 31. Wash up extra so that your hands don't stink. You know, going back and forth between those two little notes. So at least you can hear that, even if the first minor chord just didn't land whatsoever.
Well, yeah, I was curious how you did that, because I wasn't sure if it was auto-tuned or... So there was no auto-tuning on that. That was just all you singing the microtones, and then singing that slowly enough that you could sort of So you've practiced to the point where you can sing those microtones, and you can.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have to watch out for, well, usually, if I use a guide track, and things are pretty linear and not too leapy, it's pretty easy. But if there's a situation, like, I have to be careful in some tuning systems that I'm not, like, writing, say, like, F to E sharp, but the E sharp is actually higher, you know, and stuff like that. So I try to make sure to sing through all of the parts and kind of iron those things out. So yeah, and it's definitely, like, it can be hard to sing in 31. It depends on, like, the chords that you're trying to land and stuff like that. And I'm really just sort of starting to create these, like, a cappella arrangements where Dorico lets me have the notation right there. And it gives me a guide track. So I've got that all in one, finally, so I can export the tracks and follow along with the guide tracks. And sometimes I don't use them because they're not helpful, but sometimes they are necessary. So...
Yeah, and does Dorico play back the microphones correctly?
Yes, Dorico plays back the microtones. There are, I think, some instruments where there's, like, funky vibrato. It might be because of sampling reasons, but for, like, the Halion Sonic SE instrument that comes with it, there is no monkey business that I'm aware of, which is good.
That's awesome. But yeah, I really enjoyed that one, and
thanks.
It was also very it was super melodic and catchy, which people don't always associate with microtonality, especially 31 equal tones. I'm curious why you chose 31 equal tones, or what appeals to you. Is that like a temperament that you've been working in?
Yeah. Well, when I look at tunings, I definitely am sort of interested in what kind of basic sonorities I can get out of it. And for a long time, 31 has definitely been thought of as one of the kings of getting major and minor triads and mean tone temperament in general. So I think 31 has enough notes that the possibilities are just crazy, which I love, but it also gives you major and minor triads. And the 7 limit tetrad and the 9 limit pentad and the 11 limit hexad are all very, very good. So I really like being able to lock and ring otonal chords, but still be an equal temperament. And then I can also, I like thinking of equal temperament as a way to get at just ratios without having to actually think of all of the complex just ratios themselves. I just know that, I know that if you have a note that's in between a minor and a major seventh, that is a neutral seventh, and that's 11/6. And knowing that, it's if I chain some of those together or something, I don't have to multiply 11/6s together. I can just know, oh, that's kind of what a neutral seventh does in terms of lock and ring. So 31 is a really, really easy environment for making those kinds of translations in my mind. And of course, the notation is also basically a lot like 12 with just a little extra, with some half sharps and half flats. So it could read kind of like 24 or 17 as well.
Gotcha. That's cool. So do you when you notate it, is it with kind of special accidentals, basically?
Yeah. You actually, for 31, it's great because you don't, if you count the halves and the sesquies as special, then yes, you sort of need special accidentals. You could get by without them, but there might be some situations where you had a really ugly double flat or double sharp where you didn't want it, and then you could use a semi or a sesqui accidental instead. So those are the only special accidentals in 31. There are no extra arrows. And the way 31 is notated is you can think of a diatonic scale as having a whole step that's 5 degrees large and a half step that's 3 degrees large, as opposed to 12-tone equal temperaments, 2 for the whole step and 1 for the half step. So that means that it's a really, really, it's a really good compromise between those sizes that gives you chords that are quite in tune, but still a melodic diatonic scale that sounds really pretty right. Because in mean tone temperament, you're compromising between how melodic the diatonic scale sounds and how in tune the major chords are. So 31-tone equal temperament is basically dead-on quarter comma mean tone, which I think is one of the most solid compromises you can make in mean tone temperament as well. So, it's just, not only is it the exact number of notes I would want to use for the kind of thing that I'm doing, but it also happens to be my favorite mean tone flavor too. So I just lucked out.
Gotcha. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Are there other composers who are kind of champions of 31 tone temperament that I should check out?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one round that's entirely in 31 EDO called Mystery Curve, and it's so...
Oh, is that the one that you sent me a link to?
Yeah, it's...
when I was asking about rounds the other day?
Yeah, it's so freaking Xenharmonic. It kind of blew my head off the first time I heard it, and I was so happy. And it's really hard to sing, too. I have the music to it, technically.
That piece, Mystery Curve, charms me. It really, again, a very kind of melodic approach to microtonality that was just, if I didn't know better, I might think I was listening to tune yards or something,
Yeah.
This kind of funky, kind of lo-fi electronic pop stuff was really cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sending me that, by the way.
There's also other songs that are done, on the Sagittal Songbook, but they're usually presented in that round format without a lot of extra polish like Harkey Music Lovers is. I'm curious, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I was wondering, what your relationship with microtonality is, how you feel you wield it as a composer and how you think it helps you be expressive.
I have to say, I don't use it in every piece. I'm the kind of composer where I'm kind of restless and kind of explore a lot of different things.
Yeah.
A lot of my music involves electronics, and it feels like with electronics, microtonality is almost inevitable Well, I mean, because there are so many, there are so many sounds that, aren't easily expressed in 12-tone equal temperament that just kind of happen if you're working with any sort of, like live electronics or analog electronics. Anytime you have a knob, even just like a knob that controls anything related to frequency, and you're there's going to be some, temperament fuzziness in there. So I feel like that working with that kind of opened me up to these kind of timbral possibilities, and then kind of exploring it in a more, but I don't always explore it in kind of a more like theoretical or kind of planned out sense. And I would say the piece that I did with the piece that I wrote for Aaron is kind of one exception to that. Another exception to that would be I think almost 10 years ago I wrote an opera about Nikola Tesla, and Nikola Tesla had, in addition to the many other things that he did, he sort of wrote about the sciences, like the future of the sciences, what he's happening in the future, and he thought in a way, in like his own very specific way, it was like a very progressive thought for his time, but also weirdly sexist and misogynist at the same time. He thought that women would surpass men in science through government collaboration, basically. So in some ways, it's a very progressive thought, and in some ways, it's a very like essentialist, gender essentialist kind of thought. But
right.
And he sort of likened, talked about this sort of, talked about how bees collaborate and things like that. And so in the opera, this is kind of represented by these figures that appear to Tesla that are maybe visions, or you don't really know who they are, but this sort of collective of women who kind of speak to him and all give the names of different stars, and they're led by a figure named Nova. The libretto was written by a friend of mine, a really great writer named Jillian Bertar, and she was the one who sort of came up with this idea, which I loved. And so anytime they appear, there's this sort of strange choir that sings in music that's based on just intonation, with the idea that they're sort of in this future collective society that has this different sort of musical system, where that's completely different from the sort of 19th, 20th century world that the characters of the opera inhabit.
Yeah, it seems a little bit delightfully backwards to me in a sense, since just intonation is so often associated with antiquity.
Right, and to me it was there was elements of that too, because there's the sense that like maybe at some point there was an apocalyptic event that happened and people had to sort of reconstruct music from some kind of roots, and so there was an element of that too, I think. Or maybe just in my head. Maybe that wasn't in the libretto. Maybe that was just me.
Yeah.
Thinking too hard or overthinking it. But yeah, I think that piece was the first one where I really explored microtonality, but I became, like I said, kind of frustrated because I really like the sound of just intonation, but it felt like it almost gives things a very kind of like modal feel where it's really hard to create a sense of motion in that kind of music, or at least I found it hard to create a sense of motion or momentum in that kind of music. It was kind of a music of stasis, which certainly not all microtonal music is, but when I was writing in just intonation, that was my specific frustration with it.
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel that way about just intonation. I find it a bit difficult to just be constantly thinking about the ratios, but yeah, it would make sense that just intonation would produce more static music because not only are you having to think about it more, but everything is so vertical, right? If the number is telling you how the note or interval harmonizes with everything, then lots of times music I hear in just intonation, it seems like things are sort of moving from chord to chord, and it's hard to like really get a sense of deep counterpoint from that. It's something that Ben Johnston probably did better than anybody.
Yeah. Oh, and I also remembered what the original inspiration was for using microtonality in that, which was one of the things that I discovered or realized while I was working on that opera was that Tesla was in many ways directly responsible for our electronics being or all the electricity in our outlets being at 60 hertz.
Yeah.
Which I also found fascinating because musically it's a really bizarre frequency, right? It's like it's also like a flat. It's like a B. It's
B
like
quarter flat.
B quarter flat, but not quite.
Yeah.
And so yeah. In fact, I used that same. Well, I guess it's not exactly the same because 60 hertz is a little different, but that same ambiguous third between G and B quarter flat in the opera, and it's in fact like the last sound you hear in the opera is just the choir holding this kind of to this dyad of the G and the overtone of 60 hertz together. And that's the last sound of the opera you hear. So in my sort of like invented cosmology that is only in my head and not in the text of the opera, this was the 60 hertz sound was also a sound that Tesla heard and haunted Tesla. He had to turn that into something that existed in the real world. But
yes.
It's strange to think that like the fundamental frequency of all our electronics is out of tune with our tuning system, with our whole tuning system.
I like that because it might force somebody to ask the question of why that is, and then all of that other good stuff happens.
Yeah. But it's also weird to me that in Europe and a lot of other places it's 50 hertz, which actually fits in a lot better.
Oh yeah, so 50, I guess, being multiple of 100. Is that G but a little bit sharp, maybe? I want to say so, since 100 hertz would be
like
Parch's
really,
G.
really close to G. I think it's like almost imperceptibly close to G.
Oh really? Oh, that's interesting. That's different from what I thought. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So you've used just intonation in your microtonal works. Have you ever considered using other kinds of equal temperament, or have you used microtonality in spectralism and things like that, or what do you think about that?
So I guess the other recent time I've used, the most recent time I've used microtonality was in a piece that was originally for double bass and electronics. And it's funny, as I was saying earlier in our conversation, I was saying, well, you couldn't really ask someone to retune throughout a piece, and then I realized, wait a second, I've asked the performer to do that very thing. So I wrote this piece called The Deep State for a really wonderful bassist and wonderful person, Scott Worthington, who is also a really great composer who writes all these very beautiful pieces that develop very slowly. And so I thought it would be interesting to. Well, I really love the sound of the open strings on the bass, and just the way they resonate. And so it was kind of came from the idea of like, what if the piece is like all open strings, or overtones of those open strings, harmonics on those strings.
Yeah.
but then I thought, well, but again, that gets into that just intonation problem of, I'm that kind of limits the tones I can use in this way that that I don't know is super awesome.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I asked them to do like some scordatura tuning, and then so I was like kind of experimenting with other a few different scordatura tunings, and he also has on his bass, he has the the low string that goes down to C instead of E, and so I really wanted to use like really low bass tones if I could, and so I came up with, I think, a tuning that I liked that was based on C, and then another tuning that I really liked that was based on A, and I was like, well, what if I use both of them and asked it to retune? And I was like, well, that's a lot to ask to retune all 4 strings at once. So then I thought, well, what if I asked him to gradually retune throughout the piece? So he starts in the higher tuning that's based on C, and then gradually throughout the piece, he gradually retunes down to the tuning based on A.
Oh, wow.
And so you start out in this really nice consonant just intonation tuning, and then you end in this really beautiful tuning based on A, and the low A sounds amazing. And in between the kind of throughout the piece, he's kind of exploring things like the beating and the microtones that are created between different kinds of harmonics along the way, and it's a very open piece. There's a lot of improvisation in that piece. Even though it's kind of laid out sort of, what he's doing in each section. And the other thing that I'm doing, because it involves electronics, is I'm also freezing his sound, spectrally freezing his sound at certain points, so that as he's retuning, I've frozen parts of his sound from earlier, so you get the microtonality between, what he was playing, like 30 seconds or a minute ago and what he's playing now.
Oh, okay. So you kind of have almost like clashing systems happening, even.
Yeah, clashing systems, or even it's sort of like, it's sort of like if you had like a 5-1 progression that took 20 minutes to resolve. It's sort of like that. It's like a really slow. It's a consonant really, really slowly moving to another consonant with all kinds of stuff explored along the way.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Really interesting to listen to. How does the player retune in the piece? Like, how do they know that they've got their low note?
That's a good question. I think the answer is that Scott is just really good, and it's really like if you just keep track of the lowest string, and everything else is kind of in relation to that, you can kind of tune based on that, because the intervals above that are all very simple ratio things to hear and to tune to.
Right.
So as long as you don't lose track of the low string, you're fine.
Oh, good. Yeah. Wow. That's so cool, because I've heard of. There's lots of interest in, I think, people gradually changing and tuning throughout the piece, as opposed to discrete electronic changes like we were talking about earlier. But I had never, I've heard of people doing this with instruments, but not in such a controlled way before, so it's nice to know that somebody has done that.
I've never done that piece with another bassist, but if I were to do it with another bassist, I might want to introduce a drone, drones, strategic drones at certain points in the piece to kind of orient them towards specific pitches. But But I didn't have to do that with Scott. He just kind of got it.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so that piece actually got mashed together with the piece that I wrote for Aaron Kallay and Grisey, to bring the conversation full circle. And so the piece is called because pattern / deep state is kind of a mashup of those two pieces.
So you mashed up your own pieces then?
Yeah. I mashed up two of my own pieces because I recorded them for the album, and I liked them individually, and I liked them as live pieces. But there was something weird about it on an album because they were so. Well, it's like when you're listening to an album, it's a different kind of experience than when you're like in a concert hall.
Yeah.
And in a concert hall, you can. I feel like you can explore like a really limited palette of sounds in a concert setting, and that's interesting in that setting. But then there was something about an album. There was something about those pieces on an album because the deep state piece is very like, obviously it's a double bass piece, so it's a lot of very low bassy sounds. And then the piece that I wrote for Vicky and Aaron, there was a lot of activity in the treble kind of region, and it's all prepared, so it's very kind of like delicate. It's a very delicate sounding piece, and it just felt like both of those pieces felt really weirdly incomplete on an album, because you're kind of expecting when you're listening to recording. I think you want to hear like the full spectrum of sound being activated, and a lot of classical music I think doesn't, some of it does, but a lot of classical music doesn't fare well in that setting,
right?
Because a lot of orchestral music I think actually doesn't, it really doesn't have the same impact on a recording because the sound of like the one, like solo flute or something, and you're not hearing anything else, versus the full kind of orchestral tutti, it doesn't have the same impact in that setting.
Yeah.
And we're so used to hearing music that's really compressed and really immediate in that setting, and I wanted it to sound more like, not really like a pop album, but to have a more kind of, modern production feel than the feeling of a live recording of classical music,
Right. You didn't want the dynamic contrast to get in the way of what's normally experienced as consistent loudness, or kind of like a consistent area.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's weird because it's sort of like, I feel like in a lot of recorded music, sort of like timbre replaces dynamics, and it's sort of like the affect, but it might be, you might have like the verse and the chorus of a song, if you look at the waveform, it might be exactly, or really similar kind of dynamic or amplitude, but then, one is like a close mic'd breathy vocal, and then the chorus, mic'd from further away and is overdubbed, and has effects, that makes it sound like someone yelling in a stadium.
Yeah.
And it's like but the affect of the vocal, the different affects of the vocal accomplishes the same thing that the dynamic shift does. And I think does so actually a lot more effectively in that setting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good observation. Yeah. Neat.
I just think like most people in the classical music or even the new music world, they're really wedded to the dynamic contrast, and they don't want to give that up.
Right, it's hard to give up.
Which I understand, but I'm just like, I don't know. That's a battle I feel like someone else can fight that battle. I don't want to fight that battle.
Right, yeah. We can fight that battle in a different podcast.
Right.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for being on with the call with us.
This was a really fun conversation. Yeah, thanks for letting me ramble on about stuff that I enjoy rambling on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am looking forward to swapping links too. So be sure to check out Isaac Schankler's latest album. He made that hand-washing compilation album, Songs to Wash Your Hands To, I believe. You can check out the link in the description. It's very, very fun.
Yay!
Woo! Cool.
Yeah, there's something like 55 or 56 different artists on that album, including our host.
Yes!
with the only microtonal hand washing song that I know.
Hey, there we go. Maybe there will be a second one someday.
Hopefully, yeah. Maybe we'll do a volume 2 or something.
Yes. Oh, that would be great. I'd love to get a volume 2. That'd be really cool. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jason.
Cool. I'll see you later.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye. Hey, listeners. I hope you're enjoying Now&Xen. I know I'm having fun. Our bonus episode this month features Brendan Burns, Sevish, and myself. Get the scoop on Brendan's new album, Sevish's new album, cover songs, mixing, and various tuning chats. Exciting. I mentioned earlier that Elaine Walker would be part of this too. We have Elaine on the show with myself and Brendan as a May bonus episode, because we talked at somewhat different times and there was so much material that 2 episodes was really the way to go. So me, Brendan, and Sean in April, and Elaine, Brendan, and myself in May as bonus episodes. By the way, our efforts to number the episodes according to equal temperament, just intonation, tuning systems, or other related numbers appears to be more effort than it's worth. Thus, I've gone back through and renamed nearly all the episodes according to a standard episode number. This really makes things easier, and it doesn't feel like we're endlessly trying to come up with marginally related numbers that fit for episode titles. You, the patrons, voted on it, and that was a huge help, so thanks for that. Here's a Patreon update. For those of you who are unaware, I, Stephen Weigel, have arranged Easily Blackwood's 15-tone equal-tempered etude for keyboard, and played this on my YouTube channel. I plan to do this with all the etudes, even the later ones which have so many notes. So the rule is, for every 10 patrons I get, I will arrange a new etude. The next one on the chopping block is 13-tone equal temperament, and the next number to hit is the 30 patron mark. I know you want to hear this happen, so be a part of the rich history and cultural tradition of Blackwood's etudes by making a small monthly donation of only $5 or more, if you feel so inclined. Donations are appreciated more than ever during this time period. I also greatly desire your feedback on this show and what kinds of content you want to see. If you're a patron, I listen to you more than other people. You can always leave a comment on my Facebook page. As always, this show wouldn't be possible without the generosity of our 25 patrons, our Xenharmonic patrons, as well as our Xenharmonic gods, who are Kit Duguay, Hector McGuffin, Joshua Sanchez, Christopher Bailey, Leland O. Weigel, Amy Coleman, Jill Weigel, Tina Harmon Carto, and the Brass Whisperer. Catch you next time on Now&Xen. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and Libsyn, and you can follow our social media on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thanks so much! Our first May episode is going to feature Joe Monzo.